There you go.
Okay, well, it seems that's everybody. So we're going to go ahead and get this meeting started. This is the 6 p.m. June 27th, 2022 Safety Committee meeting. In attendance is myself, Councilperson McNamara. We have Mayor Hughes, Councilperson Shrestha, Wolf, Gruger, Koss, and Camera present. We also have our Chief of Police, Delp, and our village planner, Mr. Eric Fisher. So the two things that I shot out that email this morning on, or not morning, this early afternoon on, not a whole ton on the agenda today, but we have some logistical stuff with the police department that I said I would bring up with the chief, and we also need to have a discussion about I suppose the best writing and enforcement of a leash law. Does anyone have any preference which they want to cover first? I'm not particularly picky in either direction. Well, that is a resoundingly non-committal, so we will go ahead and begin with the logistics of the police department. So a few weeks ago, I had a very productive conversation with 3 or 4 officers out at the out by the pool, and they brought up a couple of things that they would love to see brought up or studied or addressed. The first one being, I guess the most overarching one would be how they get their equipment. Apparently there is a supplier we have a contract with called Leo Myers. Is that still accurate?
If we're talking about uniforms, yes.
Okay, yeah, that's what they were mentioning. There was pretty widespread desire, at least among the 4 of them present, and implied with other officers, that they would love to see an account opened, if at all possible, with Galls. Apparently the straw poll is Galls gear is more up their alley. I don't know if there's a significant cost difference there, but that's definitely something that they wanted to see if that could be pursued. With specific gear requests, the 2 that came up in our discussions were the permissibility of a more lightweight summer variant uniform. Polos were mentioned because they're apparently pretty warm in whatever they're wearing now underneath their vests. So if it would be at all possible to visit that topic, you'd have some pretty happy officers. Let's see. The other one is I don't recall exactly if this is true or if this is what was told to me, as it was some weeks ago, but they said that the tool that they use most often is actually a flashlight, and they were hoping that that could be something added on to their addition, like their initial issue of equipment. I've heard the I believe it's called the Streamlight Stinger, is very well enjoyed in the department. Also, there were some questions about how the uniform and equipment allowance works. If there be any way to get some, I guess, data or explanation on our current system for that, that would be appreciated if it could be disseminated out to the officers. Those are the major. I have one more thing to cover, but those are the logistical and supply questions I had brought up a few weeks ago. So I guess I guess the question would be, are any of those feasible to explore, or what the next steps would be from a administrative or police perspective?
Okay, I'm going to address these in order.
Okay, it was a lot, I know.
We have an account with Galls. We order several things from Galls. So I'm not
Okay.
sure why they don't think we don't have things with Galls. As far as the polos go, the uniforms that we currently wear are almost polos. The material is that performance material that wicks away moisture. The
Okay.
sleeves just have a more traditional uniform appearance rather than the polo shirt appearance. And of course, it's made that way so that it can hold a patch and do it. So I'm not really a fan of the polos unless it's one of those things where we are in a off-duty classroom type of assignment. We have like the polos that you've seen me wear to some of the meetings where it has the patch on the front.
Yeah, yeah.
That's more what those polos are for. Flashlights. When we do issue flashlights as their initial issue as part of the equipment that's issued to all the officers, even regardless of their shift, because we know that even in the daytime you have to go into some dark places, and it's good to have a flashlight with you. So we can certainly entertain different types of flashlights if they're not happy with the flashlights that are currently being issued. So we can definitely look at that.
Okay.
But, I mean, all those things you mentioned are already happening. So I'm now kind of curious if you were actually speaking to Minerva Park officers.
I have to say that I was in the Minerva Park pool. I don't know the specific ins and outs of how the department is run. I just said that I would pass these requests on.
Oh, and lastly, you were talking about a uniform allowance. We don't have uniform allowance.
Okay.
We have a uniform budget.
Okay.
And as officers need uniforms, we purchase the equipment they have. So it's like a quartermaster system where if they tear a pair of pants, we get them a new pair of pants.
Okay.
If their shoes get worn out, we get them new shoes. If they get uniforms start to fray, look old through washing and stuff, we replace them as needed. And it goes for equipment too.
Okay. That's fantastic. I'm not 100% sure what the disconnect would have been then.
Can I ask a question, Chief? Do we issue them only when they get worn out, or could we issue them on their anniversary of their start date or something like that, just to kind of keep things looking fresh? Would they last? Do they last a whole year?
Depends on which piece of equipment we're talking about. Like jackets seem to last for 2, 3, 4 years.
Okay.
Pants, you usually get about 1 to a year and a half, maybe, out of those. The shoes, they're pretty hard on shoes because they get out, they walk around, they get them muddy, dirty, and then through the cleaning of them, that just those wear out, and then
Right.
just the daily stuff that they do. So that those shoes don't last long. So shoes are about once a year.
Okay.
But as far as pants and their uniform go, we see them on a daily basis. Supervisors talk to them, and they're looking at them. And if they have pieces of equipment that appear worn or not functional, then they are put in for the replacement. So that's kind of like a weekly thing, really.
Does that include their body cams?
So the body cameras, the Axon body cameras that we use seem to be pretty robust. They're waterproof. They've been holding up really well. The current ones that we have are maybe like 5 years old. So they're doing pretty good. However, with the replacement or moving to the new cruiser cam and integrated body cam with the cruiser cam that we were talking about doing next year, we would be replacing all of the body cams at that time with new ones, and they'd be the WatchGuard body cams. So those Axon body cameras could be retired or even given to a department that maybe can't afford to, because they still work, and they still work very well.
Well, I was told that we were having a few issues with them. That's why I wanted to ask.
Oh.
My only concern is, I think it was actually the same day at the pool that there was just a few issues with them, not staying on, not recording. My biggest concern is, not only resident safety, but our officer safety.
Yeah, the only issues we've been having with them is battery swell, and
Okay.
that just happens after so many charges, because they get used on a 5 days a week. They run for, usually you can get about 10 to 12 hours out of the battery life, because they are pre-recording all the time that
Right.
audio. So in an 8-hour shift, they recharge it, and it's going to be 70% charge. So over time they start to swell, and it's pretty apparent. You got to put it on, and it's you can't put it in its mount because the battery's starting to swell. So they just write it up, and we have replacement batteries. They're not super expensive. So in fact, I just swapped one out today.
Okay.
But the batteries are user replaceable then, so we're able to replace them. We don't have to. Cool.
Okay. So I'm really happy to hear that it seems like we have a lot more already in place here than I was, I guess, given the impression of. I mean, I guess it's possible I misinterpreted, but I am really happy to hear about everything else that seems to be in place. The last thing that they brought up with me that I definitely could see the benefit to is a ability to have a bike patrol in Minerva Park with the relatively small size and interconnectedness of the village via roads and paths. I could definitely see that working. Is that just before my time that it happened, or has that been explored? And was there a reason that couldn't happen? That's the first I'd heard of it. I just wondered what the professional opinion is on it.
Well, we do have a police bike. It's down, I believe, in the shed at the pool. It's a Trek 800, I think. It would just be a matter of sending an officer to a bike patrol school, and then getting them a bike patrol uniform. The logistics with that is to schedule it when we have officers on that could still respond in a police car.
Yeah.
Having a bike patrol during special events is good. I think once we have our stadium built and we start having those sporting events, that might be a good thing to have over at the school.
Yeah, I would definitely concur with that.
As that approaches, we might want to look into an electric bike. I think that makes the whole bike cop thing a little more reasonable in my mind.
Yeah, that could be pretty neat.
That definitely could be. Yeah, I just, those were the main things. I guess just to reiterate, so we do have a goals account. I guess I just weren't aware of it. Let's see. The uniform thing. I guess that's just a discussion. I'm sorry.
Real quick, David, going back to the uniform thing, has there ever been any consideration to having an alternate white shirt uniform for the summer, I guess. Not necessarily polo, but
Yeah, that would
boy,
probably
I
be
mean,
good,
I
even if
don't
it is the
know
same
how the
material.
officers feel or not, but I see them in all black all the time out in the heat, and I'm just like, oh, that must be terrible.
I mean, yeah, I'd want them to be wearing, what is as comfortable and while still remaining professional and tactically valuable as useful. But again, that law enforcement clothing is not my forte, so I will defer to the expert on that. But I know they definitely are warm.
No, the lieutenant and I have been discussing summer uniforms because the officers brought it up to us. Something that would be a similar shirt. I mean, the shirt that we have is very lightweight. It's that performance material, and it's very breathable. Unfortunately, we have to wear, the bulletproof vest, and that vest is not breathable. It's hot. Regardless of what shirt you have on, you're still going to have a vest over top of it. The only time that vest comes off is when they come on station. They take the vest off, they cool off for a little bit, they put it back on, and then they're back out. It's just a thing, but like I tell these guys, it's better to sweat a little than bleed a lot. So, wear that vest with,
I concur completely.
yeah. I mean, so regardless of what shirt you wear, putting a tactical vest over top of it is gonna just make it a moot point. But we have discussed a summer uniform with some kind of shorts and tennis shoe configuration. So
That go along well with a bike patrol. They were actually mentioning that'd be a way to get shorts in.
Yeah.
So I definitely I don't know if you've done a straw poll, but there is interest among your peoples. So those are the main things that I had from the police officers that I spoke to. The other major thing would be the leash stuff to talk about. So I am admittedly not the point person on that, on that from the get-go. So I understand we're having debates about how it should be enforced or how it should be written. Where is the contention coming with that, and how do we find a way past it and into something effective for the village?
So here, so let's jump in here. So regarding leash, what is our actual goal? That would be my question, right?
Yeah,
That all dogs are put on a tethered leash when out away from their property. I could have swore, and I cannot find it. Years ago, when I asked this, I was given that we had a leash law, and it stated, I can't find it now. And I've even looked, if someone can find that or tell me that whatever I saw was incorrect, because it's driving me nuts. It was a 6 foot tethered leash or no shorter or no longer than 6 foot whenever you're off the property, and to maintain control. That was the big thing. I remember when Chanel was attacked, and this was years ago before Mayor Hughes was even in office. I went and I said, again, and this is when I was looking it up, is this correct? Do we have a leash law? And I was told yes. And it was stated the 6 foot. I want to find it so we can do that. And that's why I always found it surprising that, it wasn't being enforced.
It is in chapter 618 under animals. And I believe what you're looking at is super nested here. But 618.01, what is this? Subsection D, number 2, keep the dog under reasonable control of some person. So where you are finding the most wiggle is, here's another one a little bit below that. If you go to that page and just search control, there is another bit, except when a dangerous dog is lawfully engaged in hunting or something, while the dog is on premises of the owner, keep the or harbor secure, confined at all times in a locked pen. But this is a dangerous dog, right? That's a different thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
part of
this
the
was
problem
more
is
like,
an
this was
an
more that
awful
it
lot
had
of
to
the
be tethered.
code, an awful lot of the code is probably will get rewritten when they do it, because there's a lot of archaic stuff in here that I'm not sure even, I mean, I personally don't know, but let's talk about getting a license from paying for a special license if you have a dog that has been deemed vicious, and the difference between what a vicious dog is and a dangerous dog. There's also a lot of provisions in here that, clearly state you have to have your dog on the leash, especially if it's been deemed vicious, unless you are actively hunting with it or training it to hunt. Which seems, and then of course, as I read at that one meeting, there's the category about where you can have your llamas, alpacas, sheep, and pigs.
Dangerous means that it has hurt another animal. Vicious means it is actually caused severe bodily injury to a human. Vicious is almost automatically a youth thing. That's why I don't understand. That's another thing that I was talking about earlier, is just like our dogs that are getting loose. When the golf cart thing happened, I went the next day and I pulled all the animal codes. I just wanted to understand it a little bit more. And it said, if a dog is caught being loose, that's not the right way to say it. If it is loose and it's been proven 3 times, that dog will be deemed dangerous. My thing is, being deemed dangerous, that could actually, it's not the dog's fault, it's the owner's fault, right? It's common respect. But they do have to have like this specialty insurance. But I don't know. Just when you get into titles of animals, that can get pretty bad.
Yeah. And I think what Brian was talking about was 951.02 subsection D, which starts with the hunting thing. But anyway, because apparently if you're engaged in hunting, your dog can do whatever it wants. It says no owner, keeper, or harborer of any dog shall at any time fail to do either of the following, which is weird. Either means you have a choice. A, keep the dog physically confined or restrained on the premise of the owner, keeper, or harborer by a leash, tether, adequate fence, supervision,
That's
or
it.
secure enclosure to prevent escape. 2, keep the dog under the reasonable control of some person. And that's where that phrase, reasonable control, because I've seen people with their dogs and their tennis balls, and they have the tennis ball launcher and they're tossing it and the dog's coming back and it seems like they're under control. And I'll let Chief Delp, because he had his hand up, go.
So I would encourage everybody to pull up this section, 618.01 that we're reading through, and go through the definition so you understand what the difference between dangerous dog, nuisance dog, and what serious injury is and what defines a vicious dog. It seems that it's referencing a lot of revised code numbers, which is the 95102 that you wrote. That's an ORC number. So
Yeah.
it's just basically referencing the Ohio Revised Code. So it looks like our ordinance is following the state code. Yeah, I would definitely perhaps read this and get a better understanding. But it's definitely the 6-foot leash that you're referring to, Councilman Trusta, is regarding dangerous animals. So if you have the what is considered a dangerous dog, that one has to be kept in a certain manner. So it has to be, a chain link leash or tether, not more than 6 feet in length. So that's, I think, where you got the 6-foot leash. But the meat of this for our purposes is the reasonable control section of this ordinance, which just says you have to have reasonable control. And that's where we're running into these situations where people have these dogs off leash that are then running up to people, barking at them in a menacing fashion, not necessarily biting them, but causing alarm. And that's not reasonable control. So when that happens, that's when, you know, we have to get involved and find these people and have a talk with them, explain to them what they need to be doing, because if their dog's going to act in that manner, it needs to be on a leash. So.
All right, so I think that brings us back to the question of what is our goal? Is our goal truly that all dogs in the village that are off their residential property be leashed? Right, and then I'll ask the follow-up question of that, since I see Councilperson Shrestha nodding her head, right? I often see dogs and people playing fetch in the park, right? I live across the street from the park, and it's not uncommon. Is that truly a behavior that we do not want?
I wouldn't say, is it a truly behavior we don't want? Is it a behavior that we're willing to take a risk of a resident getting hurt or another animal? You know what I mean? That is what dog parks are for. If we want to talk about a dog area later down the road, I just think that's what's safe. You know what I mean? Because at any time that dog that's chasing that tennis ball is still an animal. At any time, and even if this dog is going up to another canine, being the friendliest it can be, going up, like Chief Delp said, going up and barking, not attacking them, but another dog can take that as a form of aggression. And then before you know it, you got them going at each other. And again, someone can get hurt. You have a child around trying to pull these two apart. That's how it happens. So just let's keep it safe. That, in my personal opinion, that's what I think.
Sure, those are all possibilities, right? And so my question to that is, with a standard of reasonable control, it would seem to me like a person with an animal that can't be called back doesn't have reasonable control. But do we limit the liberties of everybody else who may have an animal that is under reasonable control, right? Or because there may be people who don't? That's my question. Go ahead, Councilperson Coss.
My question is, well, I have a two-parter. Are you guys ready? So first of all, I want to hear what Chief Delps and Nikki's recommendations are about this. But second of all, is that definition the problematic one? Is it too broad? And do we need to kind of either make it that, hey, within this park, it is acceptable to have your dog off leash, and do we just limit it to that, to limit one of those problems? Or do we change the verbiage so it's a little bit more specific? Because I think the verbiage is part of the problem as well. Is it hard to enforce that verbiage? So those are kind of my questions, things I think we need to talk about today, actually.
I guess I could begin. I guess it comes down to, if we had an established dog park where you could go and do those kind of activities, that would be one thing. But the question becomes, if I'm in my front yard with my dog off leash, are we going to then become make that you're out in the public and you need to have your dog on a leash? So like, where does that public start? Does it start when I step off my property? In which case, if I'm in my front yard with my dog playing, you know, frisbee catch, whatever I'm doing, and someone walks by, my dog runs down and barks at them, you know, where does that, you know, does that become okay? The second part of that is to Councilman Wolf's point, is our intention to just say all dogs on leash when you're out in public. If that's the goal of council, then, you know, you just have to enact legislation to make that a thing. If the goal is to keep things as they are, then maybe it becomes an education thing, and we just try to get messages out to the people via our social media, our newsletters, and other things, just to educate people as to what actually reasonable control means.
And I guess I have a follow-up question with that is this actually like a problem that you guys deal with all the time? Or is this something that theoretically happens? In regards to dogs and issues with that?
So I don't know what the actual calls for service would look like. I haven't heard of any issues other than an escapee dog that was down the street on Alder Vista that kept, I don't know, tunneling out like a POW or something. But yeah, it happens. I mean, dogs, we see dogs at large. You know, a lot of times it's just the little dog that went through the gap in the fence. But often we see these, you know, larger animals running around, and they may not even be from our area. Dogs can travel, you know, miles while they're off leash. So, but I can't say that it's a problem per se. When we find them, we try to catch them, or we call animal control, and they come out and they catch them. That's kind of the standard MO right now.
I don't think it's a problem, Anastasia, so much with law enforcement wise, but I don't know if you saw like Facebook today. It was brought up. A lot of animal owners don't feel like they can walk their dogs because they are afraid that their dog is reactive. And if a loose dog comes up to them, even though they're containing their dog, that could start. Again, if an animal's been under any sorts of trauma, you know, that can there be a slippery slope. Even if I have my dog contained, someone don't do theirs and it comes up, I mean, again, it can go bad real quick. I think my question, and to kind of hit on what Chief Delp said, I think you would have to have some kind of like structure. Again, if we're in our yard and someone comes in my yard, you know, that is my property. But again, I also think if we have those leash in public spaces, it's going to be easier to enforce. Again, we're going to have to have the right words to kind of clarify all that. But then again, it's also going to have, you know, kind of dwindle down on some of that personal interpretation. Leash in public spaces. Now, again, when we're talking about you have your animal in your yard, it should still be under control and this and that. But
Can we go back to your example? I just want to make sure that I understood your example that you brought up. That somebody who their own animal is reactive, meaning that they will not interact with other dogs well.
Correct.
They take their dog out on a leash, right? And somebody
Correct.
else whose dog is under reasonable control may approach that animal, and the reactive animal would cause harm to the other animal.
no,
And so what you're saying is that what we need to do is restrict the
No.
animal that was not aggressive.
no, not at all. What I meant was the animal that is reactive and the animal that's not on the leash. We always think an animal's under control. At the end of the day, let me tell you, they're animals. If they see something that they want to interact with, and you say, "Hey, Fido," Fido is not always going to necessarily listen. So again, if you have an unleashed dog that may think is in control and goes over to a dog reactive, that would be an instant battle royale right there, because
Right.
that dog is taking that.
I get that, but what I'm pointing out here is that you are directing, or your suggestion is that we restrict the non-aggressive animal for the benefit of the aggressive animal.
Well, I think,
No,
Nikki,
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong. I think what you're saying is we're protecting both dogs in that situation. No?
100%. Yeah, 100%. I mean, we do have a guy walking a dog without a leash that has plunged at many other dogs, and this guy will laugh in residents' faces.
Well,
I mean, it's an issue.
except that then is clearly an animal that's not under reasonable control, and we currently have what we need if people are making reports, right? We don't need to leash every dog because that dog is a jerk.
No, it's not that, no. I mean, I'm talking about keeping residents, and it's not just about animals, it's about residents as well. Because dog bites happen, they happen. It's for the 3 dogs that you see catching a tennis ball that can do it in their backyard to keep everybody else safe. I think that is important. And that's, again, my
Sometimes,
personal-
what if there's a dog that's under reasonable control, but like comes up to you and you don't want that dog like in your kid's face or something like that too?
And
It's, I think it
then
is common
And
courtesy.
if you
in a lot of ways.
can, sure. And if we're gonna legislate common courtesy, that is a huge ball of wax to open up, right? We can't just legislate common courtesy. Because, I'd like legislation to require pleases and thank yous and, doffing of hats and all of that kind of stuff, right? That's not a standard that I think we can approach. But safety is, I'm down with understanding safety, but legislating for safety also has to be meted or measured against the liberties that we are restricting. That's all I'm trying to get to, and to make sure that we all understand what we are taking from people to give a little more safety.
if it's 3 dogs not being able to play tennis ball, but in their backyard, I think that's worth it. My personal
Well,
opinion.
hey, I'm gonna take exception with, but in their backyard, because not every backyard is big enough for a game of fetch.
Then
right.
you have a dog park.
Where's the closest dog park?
So we
You know
don't
what?
is, I suspect, the contention
You
here.
know what we can do? We will actually make you a local dog park, and I will put maps with stars for everybody.
Well, no,
got you.
I mean, where is the closest dog park? I don't know.
Bark
Honest
Park.
question.
Bark
Bark
Park,
Park.
down
Where's-
by, before you get to Roush, so Schrock and Cleveland, a little bit down there to the left. So it's not that far, but we have so many around this area, and that might be something we want to talk about in the future. You never know.
Sure.
There is that property near the retirement home or whatever that aged care facility is that's up for sale for some time. We could turn that into a little dog
Yeah.
park.
So my only question or my only comment to this, and again, I'm just here to listen. All the dogs that get out, we see them on Facebook, I feel like every single day. So what is your solution for that? Because you can't let's just be honest, if there's a no leash and their dog gets out, they're out without a leash. So are we going to continue to find these people every single time? Because some people's dogs get out almost every single day. I
Hey, that
understand
could
the
open up a whole
responsibility of the
nother.
homeowner. So I think it's one of those that if we're going to be asking our police department to enforce certain things, we just want to make sure that it's worded the way that it should be worded, because in my opinion, the person's dog that is getting out every single day should be held just as accountable as the person that's playing fetch or something else along those lines. So I just think and now that said, I don't know that I want the residents to be, that's pushing it. I mean, if my dog accidentally got out one time, I mean, there's people that abuse it, I get, or not abuse it, but if my dog accidentally got out one time, I'm gonna say this, I'd be pissed if I got in trouble for my one time that my dog got out. So, but again, how do you legislate that? So that would be my question, is how far do you go? Because knock on wood, I've never had a problem with our dogs getting out. I see other people that have problems every day. So in that one time, how do you? So I think there, you just kind of have to look at all different avenues of why dogs are out without a leash. So that's my only comment. I think that would be the only concern. That would be my biggest concern, is for the people that really do take care of their pets and make sure that they're, they dot their I's and cross their T's, make sure the gates are closed and all of that one time. I don't know. So there's got to be a way to figure that part into it.
So could it be that when you're walking your dog, it has to be on a leash? You know, can we kind of start there?
What if I'm,
I could be supportive of that.
what if
I mean,
I'm
there's-
jogging my dog, or
If you're what?
jogging my dog, or, so walking dog is not it's not a specific thing. What I think walking
but
my dog
yeah,
is. could be
You're
different.
playing semantics, but
Well, we are talking about writing a
No, I
law.
understand what you're saying, take the gist of what I'm saying and come up with the right words instead of
no,
saying,
Yeah. I'm kind of being a little devil's advocate. I'm just saying that, specificity matters. We are writing legislation here. Yes.
I fully agree.
Councilperson Cost, you have your hand up.
I'm sure we're not the only ones talking about this, and I'm sure there's already verbiage about leash laws in other municipalities around here. I think we should just do a little bit of, instead of reinventing the wheel, I think it would be pretty easy and a time saver if we just looked at other municipalities and kind of have seen what they're doing instead of arguing about semantics at this point, in my opinion.
And now we had
Including
asked-
including what people are doing for their front lawn. In my personal opinion, I think if your dog is in the front lawn and you're playing fetch with your dog, that's fine. But we need to come up with a way that it's safe for everybody, but also to word it correctly. That's what I'm gonna say.
Yeah, no, there was a request for Mr. Fisher to sort of see what was out there and bring some basic research. I don't know if I was remembering that correctly or not, or what have you. Enforcement. No.
Yeah, I mean, I would never presume that we have any right to tell a dog it has to be leashed in their own backyard, but I don't know, I really would be, about the properly written law of, walking or jogging your dog in a public place. I mean, I don't know. That's just where I'm at, though. I don't have a dog. That is full disclosure.
Well, and I will just go on to say the idea of playing fetch in your backyard. I mean, we're on quarter-acre city lots. Your poor golden retriever is not going to be happy running 15 feet, grabbing the ball and coming back. I will say, as far as the reasonable control, because I do have a dog and walk her pretty regular. So I see lots of other dogs. And, there was one day I was walking home by the park and someone was playing fetch with their dog. And they both whined enough that we let them slowly get close together. And the dog was playing fetch, so it was off leash. And once they got a foot or two apart, they decided to start growling at each other. So I jerked my dog's leash and said, "Stop that." And he snapped and pointed and said no, and his dog sat down and I pulled my dog away. And I guess my point of that, anecdotal as it is, there is such a thing as reasonable control, and some people do have it over their dogs, because there was growls going on and he said stop and sit, and the dog responded. And my dog's not as well trained, that's why I keep it on a leash. But once I pulled it away and said stop it, it said, "Okay, fine, you can pull me."
Mark, I know exactly what dog you're speaking of. Very, very well trained. However, I would like to inform you, as of last week, I was told that dog did get into altercation with another dog and had it by its neck. So again, and I will say, I always said that dog is the most well-behaved dog I've seen. So that's just the point I'm trying to make. Even if I
I guess I would caution us.
Or Angels, it can always happen, right? So that's our job, is to keep people safe, right?
I would caution us from thinking of specific dogs when we discuss this kind of legislation.
That's exactly what I was going to say. That evidence is anecdotal and it's okay until it's not. And that's a fallacy, actually, in thinking that just because it was okay one time and it's a dangerous situation doesn't mean that you're going to have the same outcome every time.
Correct.
But all the evidence that's been brought up has been anecdotal at this point. Someone on Facebook said this or this happened to a dog. So that's why I decided it was includable.
Should we contact Jesse about this? Or are we not on the same page yet?
I guess I would say that, for my own opinion, I feel that the reasonable control standard is sufficient. And maybe what we should do is take some time to educate our people that if you find our people out there with dogs to which they do not have reasonable control, make the appropriate report. Right? That's what we have in place now, and it's not being utilized because clearly Chief Delp isn't expressing that we are getting lots of calls on this, right? So, you know, maybe if we then find that we are getting lots of calls, that's the data that we would need to change what we have as our standard. But that's simply my opinion.
Right. And my question is to Chief Delp, and you feel that that verbiage is enough for you to be able to enforce that if we kind of go with that verbiage?
I think that it would be on a case by case basis, but yes, if there's something that went on and it resulted in an injury to an animal or a person, then we can definitely take some kind of enforcement action about reasonable control.
And there is even some stuff in our, I mean, I haven't memorized it or fully parsed it, but our code does have mention of menacing behavior, which would be outside of reasonable control as well. So even if a dog is just, menacing fashion, a dog that would cause any person being chased or approached to reasonably believe that the dog would cause physical injury to that person, right? So if a dog is acting in a menacing fashion, that would also be outside of reasonable control. It's seems pretty clear to me. So that is something that if a person felt that a dog was acting in a menacing fashion, they should make that phone call.
But it also says in Ohio, dogs must be physically confined or restrained or properly leashed and controlled. I have saw this. So that's why I want to ask Jesse, because that's kind of, I want to understand it as well, right? Might as well learn a few things while we're doing this. And Ohio leash law says it has to be properly leashed and controlled. So again,
Wait, where did you read that last bit from?
Animal leash requirement, Ohio laws rule 1501-46.
So it's a state that you're saying that's a state legislation.
Yeah, I'm trying to compare it to see, you know what I mean? But again, it says every community does have a specific leash law. The law requires that dogs be kept on a leash at all times when on public property. While on private property, dogs must be under the control of their owners. So again, when you're on public property, leash it up. When you're in your yard, just make sure your dog's behaving, but the dog should be able to go wherever he wants. It's his yard, right? Just don't have your dog be an ass in the front yard. That's all.
It's reasonable.
You know,
Don't have your dog be a dog.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Do you have an RC or some sort of citation to go with what you're reading? I'm just trying to read what you're reading so that my eyeballs are looking at it too.
Let me pull this up here.
Because of course, if the state law directs that on public property, dogs need to be leashed, then that's just what it is, right?
Right.
We can't be less restrictive than state law.
I read it as the same that we currently have. Under Ohio laws and administrative rules legislatively, it basically just says that any animal found, hang on, where did I just see that? It shall be unlawful for a person who is the owner or handler of any animal to refuse or fail to keep such animal
There it is.
and in the hand under control. So basically it's in a leash or under control. Westerville
It
says
says
leash or under
and.
control. Most of them say, I just went through Worthington, Gahanna, and Westerville, and they all say the same as ours, which is basically on a leash or under owner's control.
Okay, so rule 15, it says on a leash, in hand and under control at all times. Here, I'll send this.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at it on something that was last updated February 25th of 2022 at 1:44 p.m. 1501-46-306. Animal leash requirements. It shall be unlawful for a person or the owner or handler of any animal to refuse or fail to keep such animal on a leash in hand. Okay, yeah, on a leash in hand and under control at all times within area administered by the division except for 150146-9-10.
Right.
So you got to then go to that and see what it says. So it gives like A, B, C, D, E, unless it's this, and then you've got to go see what 1501.
I think this is a question.
Dog
Domestic
exercise area.
dogs and cats are only permitted in camping areas. So then, it continues to go on through all of this.
Would you like a summary from Jesse? Perhaps that'll solve the
Yes.
issue. We'll get that to everyone and
Yeah.
we'll do a summary and get everyone.
Yeah.
That seems like that's the next route.
Yeah, because Westerville, Worthington, and Gahanna all pretty much say the same thing ours says. Under control of the owner.
So I think if we are gonna say that we are gonna wait for legal counsel to give a summary, then is there anything else on this issue we wanted to discuss? Sorry, David, I feel like I'm stepping all over your meeting, so holler at me if I'm.
No, I wasn't. I mean, I was aware that we were still debating this stuff. But I wasn't 100% tuned in. I must have missed the initial meeting. But no, those are the major things that I wanted to address. It sounds like the major issues with the police department, or not issues, but the major questions from the police department are either implemented and the information just needs disseminated, or already being discussed from the administrative level there. And it sounds like we're going to be getting some input from Jesse about options, different routes we can go with the dog leash ordinance. So I believe this has been relatively productive.
Yeah, if we have that summary by the Saturday morning work session, we can continue that discussion sometime there. Otherwise, I think the next safety committee meeting is probably the next place.
Thank you for your explanations, Chief Delp. I appreciate your taking the time to come and join us.
Hey, I know that we're running up against our next meeting, but I think there were two other topics that I've heard discussion on that probably fall into this group. One is about some type of camera over at the basketball court. I know that has been discussed amongst various people for safety. And then the other thing that's come up a few times that I've heard from residents is that they call that non-emergency number, but they don't feel like they're getting to the village. And so I don't know if we can do some digging into what might be happening there.
The non-emergency number rings to Franklin County Dispatch because that's who we use for dispatch.
Right. No, I
So when you
understand
call
that.
number, that's who they're gonna get.
Right. No, I understand that. But we tell people to call that number for dogs, and if we see incidences at the basketball court, and I'm hearing people say we call that number, but there's no record of it in the village. So,
So Jason, if you can figure out that puzzle.
yeah,
I came here in 2015.
okay,
I don't know how else to convey to the
Yeah.
residents that call the 525-3333 number, give Franklin County Dispatch, tell
Yeah.
them where you're
Right.
at, who you are, and they will send an officer immediately.
Yeah.
But it seems that it's just, they hear Franklin County Sheriff's Office and then they hang up the phone.
Let's make a graphic. Let's kind of brand something.
yeah,
Sorry, guys, I can't help it. It's just the way I think.
But
Let's think of a graphic, something that's catchy, put it out every other week. Just keep hitting on it. You know what I mean? If you keep something in someone's mind, they don't forget it. And add all those little small points. Have it linked to the website
yeah.
so people are constantly seeing that. I mean, that's all we can do, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I've been fighting this battle for a long time. The other one is that people will call this building at 10 p.m. at night
Mhm.
and they leave a message in general voicemail,
Right.
which gets lost in the shuffle somewhere in this hodgepodge that we've got here. And finally, a couple days later, that voicemail pops up on someone's phone
Right.
and it gets received. And then we call them up and they're like, well, I called days ago. It's like, and then we explain to them that you need to call this other number
Have we
after
ever
hours.
have we ever thought about posting some signage around the village with that number on it, just to make it a little easier
Yeah, that's a good idea. And I would also suggest that maybe every now and then we send out a postcard specifically with this item.
Yeah, with new residents coming in the village, and we did do this. I know Leah I believe Leah, the last time we got some magnets for National Night Out. And if we did or didn't, or if we don't have any left, maybe that's something that we could also do is get
Just like
some.
this.
Yep. So I have one on my fridge and I think it's important for people to have it, but I am as guilty as, and I know we're trying to get to the other one, I'm as guilty as everybody else. The first time I called that number, it got Franklin County Sheriff. I doesn't matter how many, again, I didn't know. So I know now, and now, it's like, I get frustrated because I'm like, come on, people, we've told you this 1,000 times, but I'm as guilty as I've done it.
Okay.
So
I like the magnet idea. I think that's great. And maybe like, how the MPCA has a welcome packet, maybe we should include that in there too. But that's
That'd
something.
be a really solid thing to do. I
believe it
completely
used to
agree.
be. I believe it used to be. Again, we do put it in the newsletter. I can't tell you how many times I know we have put it in the newsletter to call the 525-3333. Because I know for a fact we've done it multiple times. We can continue to do that. It's on the website, it's on everywhere. And like Chief said, it's sometimes people still call the building and leave a voicemail. So
All right, well, we are right at 7 o'clock. Is the other meeting is a separate Zoom link or is it the same
Yeah.
Zoom link?
no,
It is a
Right.
separate
All right, well then let's hop and join.
link, isn't it?
give me 2 seconds.
Yeah, be all over
Thank
there.
you all.
Well, I moved to a